All right, everybody. Hello. It is Ryan Catherwood. It is Friday, 11:30 East Coast time. You are listening to Alumless. Thank you for tuning in. It's great to have you here. On the show, we talk about alumni and donor engagement strategies and educational advancement. I'm Ryan Catherwood, of course, and the man sitting to my right on the screen and in your audio is Chris Marshall. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Ryan, good to see you.
It's great to see you too. It's Friday, February the 3rd, and I am actually on the road, as are you this week. We are back in North Carolina. I am on the campus of beautiful High Point University, my first time visiting High Point, one of our new partners, and you are adjacent to the Alumni Center at NC State, where I was 2 weeks ago.
Correct. Yeah, I just left their alumni board meeting and walked over here to do this. I'm heading back later this afternoon. NC State, great alumni center with a Marriott hotel 200 yards away. It's my favorite part of it.
Which is just amazing, right? To have a Marriott hotel of that caliber right across the street from the Alumni Center. Well, it's great to be here with everyone. Exciting show for us. I'm certain that everybody will enjoy hearing from Howard Wolf at Stanford. It is great to be on the road sometimes, Chris. I know you enjoy the traveling from time to time. But when you are thinking about, and you're actually at a board meeting, I believe, this morning. I don't know if you've already attended or you're going to this afternoon.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about some of the board meetings that you've attended and some of the interesting highlights or occurrences that you might remember that happened at a board meeting while you were either a consultant or just a witness.
Yeah, I'll give you a highlight and a low light, but I can tell you this, that the number of board meetings I've attended is north of 500. I can't give you the exact number, but it's a lot. The highlight just happened. Well, there are several highlights that fall in the same category. When a board chooses to have their meeting, if you're an Ohio institution and your board meeting is in January, and say, let's have it offsite in Miami. That's a highlight. So that was happened to me last week. So I've had several of those where I got to go to nice places in the winter, and that's always great, and great attendance, of course, when you have those. But a low light was early in my career as a consultant. I attended a meeting of a large public institution, Alumni Association board meeting, where we all came into the room. We sat down. They opened the meeting. Gavel came down, and they asked everyone who was not a voting member to leave. And an hour later, the president came out and said, I've had a vote of no confidence, and was off the board and left the room. And that was the beginning of my consulting career.
So there was a sort of coup d'etat in your first ever alumni board meeting. That's a wild one.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. That's a good story. And thanks to everyone who is tuning in today, Barney and Matt and Alicia. It's great to have you. Those of you who are checking us out today, maybe you're huddled up as a team and talking about alumni relations and listening to us in the background, or maybe you're attentively listening to us right now, not in the background, right? This is all front and center, of course.
I see.
But so Chris, there's an interesting dynamic that exists around alumni association boards, the alumni office, advancement, and it's a little different at each university. Why do you think there's not more uniformity around how alumni engagement should be done?
Yeah, I think it's I think we're just all different stages. Evolutionary stages are different depending on the institution, depending on your traditions, your history, your funding model, your staffing, and legal independence or financial independence. All those things are factors. So I think there are general trends in our industry that we see over time. But at any given moment, a single glimpse, there's some institutions that are lagging, some that are ahead, and some that are right in the middle. And that's what I think we're seeing right now. And a big part of it is how a board member or a board and its culture views themselves as a governance body, a management body, an advisory body. What role does the board play? And the line between governance and management is often that evolutionary stage issue where things are, which I think is why it gets to the point where we have people at different places and schools at different stages. And one of those places that have been out ahead for a long time, we're about to talk to. So let's end the chatter with us and bring in the guy who's a thought leader in this space in all kinds of areas. So let's talk to Howard.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan to me. All right. Well, it's today's special guest today. I think Matt Winston referred to him as either the dean or the provost of alumni engagement. We'll see. We'll bring him out right now to see whether he likes that acronym. So here we go. Howard Wolf, Vice President for Alumni Affairs at Stanford University. It's great to see you.
Good to see you as well.
We're glad to have you on the show. And thanks for getting up and making us first thing as part of your day. It's great to have you, and there's lots to discuss. Of course, perhaps last episode, we had Patrick Auerbach on the show from USC, and towards the end of the show, we were teasing your appearance, and Patrick, Chris, and myself, we all agreed that it would be great to chat with you because you're something of an alumni relations purist. We said this in a loving way, but I wanted to sort of ask you how you feel about that and what that means in your view.
Well, I don't mean to be difficult, Ryan, but exactly what do you all mean when you say I'm an alumni relations purist? I've not heard the vernacular before, so I'm a little bit at a loss. And if I'm pure, does that mean people that do the opposite, are they unpure? I mean, I'm just trying to understand what you guys are talking about here. Happy to answer the question. I want to just learn a little bit more about how you're thinking about this.
Well, that makes total sense. And I appreciate you pushing that question back on us to further explain. I think what that was talking about was the connection with philanthropy, and that alumni relations should not be connected with philanthropy. And in a sense, it's more of a pure strategy when alumni relations is on its own with further scope and scale and not directly associated with the strategy for raising philanthropic funds.
Got it. So the structure at Stanford is a bit unique these days. We are separate from development. I report to the president of the university, and the head of development essentially reports to the president of the university as well. And that's been the structure that we've had for the last 22 years since I've been here. But without attaching labels of purist or non-purist, or whatever you want to do to alumni relations, I think I would respond as follows. I think what we do, this craft of alumni relations, is fundamentally a noble pursuit that strengthens our universities and colleges. We believe here at Stanford that a connected and engaged alumni body strengthens the institution. If we're good at what we do, it makes the job of our development colleagues less difficult. And although you might call us purists here, John Denny, who's the vice president for development, is literally 15 feet down the hall, and we're in each other's offices every day, right? So if we're good at what we do, it makes the job of our development colleagues less difficult. But at least at Stanford, and this just is what works for Stanford. We don't do what we do simply to promote giving. We do what we do because it's a worthy pursuit on its own. So here's the thought experiment. And I've talked to Chris about this before. I have a couple of thought experiments just to throw out for people. Let's assume for purposes of discussion that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation decides that they just don't want to be in that business any longer, right? It's just not something that they want to do. Bill and Melinda want to go off their separate ways, as we've seen, and they want to do separate things. And so they shut down the foundation. And so since Bill sent a couple kids to Stanford, he says, they're pretty good at what they do. Let's let them fix the world, and gives us $100 billion. Just try that thought experiment out for a second. If Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were to give us a $100 billion gift, we probably wouldn't need a development team any longer. As a matter of fact, it would be anathema if you went out to your alums and fundraised after receiving a gift of that size. But we would still need an alumni association. It would exist for exactly the same reasons it exists today, which is to connect alumni to each other and to the university to them, making for a stronger university. So there's one thought experiment. The second one's a little bit more dire. Let's assume that the big earthquake that everyone talks about in California actually happens, and the west half of California falls into the ocean, and Stanford University no longer exists. I would posit you would still want an alumni association so that people who had graduated from that university could still interact with each other, maybe reminisce. I doubt they would be raising money to start a new university because the land would be gone. But I know that's a crazy thought experiment. But when you play those thought experiments and roll them through your brain, you understand that an alumni association exists for reasons other than simply to help in giving. And my worry about this, and Chris has heard me talk about this ad nauseum, my worry about where universities are going today, and there are trends here, is that we're becoming much more short-term in our perspectives as universities, focused on immediate results, a lot of which has to do with fundraising, that are easily measurable. Those things are easily measurable, and when things are measurable, people tend to do those things. And I fear that that can lead to a lot of short-term decision-making that could hurt universities' long-term prospects. We've seen this in corporate America. And we, the folks who do alumni relations, we need to be the ultimate long-term thinkers on campus, 10, 20, 50 years down the road. And so that's the way that I look at this. And without using terms and labels, that's the way we look at things here at Stanford.
Well, I think it was a fantastic explanation of your philosophy and how you're approaching things. Chris, sort of following up, any sort of interesting sort of thought process? What was running through your mind as you were hearing Howard explain his thought process there?
Howard and I have had debates on this topic, discussions, not debates, not arguments by any means, but I actually agree with everything he said. I think it's dead spot on. The next question that you all know that we do prep, we have scripts for these things. The next question is actually what was coming through my mind is that on the continuum of $100 billion gift to the institution to schools that have, a very small alumni staff with very small budgets, Stanford is further along towards that, not 100 billion by any means. They have more resources, more luxury to be able to do things. So Howard, I wonder, and you and I have talked about this, but let's talk it out publicly here. If you have the benefit of resources that others don't, that it's easier to say those things where most places are under pressure in the now versus the long term.
Yeah, I know the argument, and I understand the argument, Chris. And you and I have had this discussion, not argument. We've had this discussion. Stanford as a university is blessed with an endowment north of $40 billion. The Stanford Alumni Association has a staff in excess of 100 people centrally, right? All under our auspices. So we are blessed with tremendous resource. But what's odd about that is, as blessed as we are, we do worry about resources just like everyone else. It's just that our agenda may be larger, right? So, Stanford relies on fundraising just like every other university and college in America. We're pretty good at it, but we rely on it. So the endowment itself pays for well over 20% of the operating cost of the university, which is around $7.5 billion. And the gifts that come in every year are vital to keeping the lights on. I know that sounds disingenuous because we're such a big, wealthy university, but the fact of the matter is the scale of the issues may be different, but the issues remain.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Totally fair. That what is on our plates, if you're an overwhelmed alumni shop of 1, is still an overwhelmed shop of 100 if you're doing the scale of X 100X.
Exactly.
Yep, totally get it. Yep.
So Howard, I feel like I know some of what you might say as what are some of the things that you'd like to change about our field. What would you say are the things that keep you up at night when you think about alumni engagements more broadly? You kind of hinted a little at this.
Well, so if I could change anything about our field, what would it be? I think we all need to do all we can on our campuses to make it clear how vitally, that was 3 vitalities, important alumni stakeholders are in the life of the university. I don't think we do a very good job of that as a craft. I think we get subsumed into a bigger agenda, but I think we need to step back and make people realize, we all talk about this. Students come and go, staff come and go, faculty stay longer, but they oftentimes are acting as free agents or contractors. Alumni are ours forever. They are there forever. And those of us who've been in the business a while know that well because they come back time and time again and share what they think. And the importance to which I refer here goes well beyond their ability or desire to be philanthropically generous. We love that at Stanford. Stanford has a phenomenal record of fundraising, well over $1 billion a year for the last several years. But in addition to that very important service that alumni play, they're our ultimate brand ambassadors, right? They have a vested interest in the value of their degrees, and they take that seriously, and they want their alma maters to succeed. That's a huge superpower that universities have that I don't think that we take full advantage of today. And as I've learned many times over the course of the last nearly 22 years, when we err they hold us accountable. And you know what? That's like a conscience. And that conscience is a really, really important part of an academic community like Stanford or other universities and colleges who might be watching this show.
Yeah. Let me jump in a little bit and react to 2 comments. One, Howard, there are places out there when they talk about their community, X institution, the community, they'll say the faculty, staff, students, they throw in parents occasionally. And I'm always looking to see if they throw in the word alumni. So for those folks on the call, check out your documents, check out your statement, your mission statements, and your strategic plans for your institution, and see if the word alumni is in there. I had one student who had worked on a strategic plan for a month, and he said, "What do you think of this?" And I put it back to the president. I said, "The word alumni isn't in here." And he was shocked. He couldn't believe it. And he looked through it. Sure enough, it was right. And they went back in and built it into all the different things they were thinking of. So I had another school who used to say faculty, staff, students. And then they had a president come in who said, "You know what? It's faculty, staff, students, and alumni." And that changed the game. It put everybody on a mind frame that they're part of this community now.
Well, Chris, it's one of the reasons that I don't like the trend of vernacular using external relations.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because external means not a part, right? So when you think about the public, you think about government affairs, you think about communications to the world. I'd like to think that our alumni, although not on campus any longer, are still an internal constituency who cares deeply.
I love that. Yeah. When I was in your role at Cornell, I'll never forget this. Early in my career, I stood in front of 2,000 alums, and I said, the greatest strength of our base and what I have in terms of my role is that we have loyal, passionate alums who want to tell us what they think about the institution. And then the greatest weakness and challenge I face is that we have loyal, passionate alums who want to tell us what they think of the institution. It goes both ways, but you're right. There is accountability and a conscience that comes with it, and you have to embrace it. And I like the way you just said it. They're not external; they're an internal. They're vital. They're the only permanent constituency of our community.
Amen.
And the idea of creating brand ambassadors, I could not agree more. As someone who's always tried to tackle the challenges of engagement from something of a communications perspective, thinking about a brand ambassadors as a really important component of what we're doing. Howard, how do you all at Stanford think about brand ambassadors? We're slightly off script here, but sure if you can follow up with just a few more remarks about how you think about brand ambassadors.
Oh, this is a great question. So I like to say that from 35,000 feet up in the air, the alumni associations at universities and colleges are the corporate brand marketing arms of those universities and colleges. We're all about engagement, awareness, connection, and good feelings. And I think that's a huge, that's the analogy that I use. I'm burdened by the fact that I'm trained as a business guy. And that's where I spent my first 20 years in the business world, right? I went to business school. This is my world. And so I think of things in terms of business analogs. And so when you think of an alumni association as the corporate brand marketing arm, think of Apple selling the company, not the iPad, not the iPhone, not the earbuds. I mean, we're talking about selling the company. I'm selling Stanford every day, right? And if I have an inside sales force of 100 people that do that work in selling Stanford. But I also have 240,000 alums who potentially could be the ambassadors who also sell Stanford. And so it's incumbent upon us. It is imperative that we all arm them with stories about our universities and colleges that they can share with others to share the great things that our universities and colleges are doing. I mean, let's be very clear. The United States of America only does a handful of things really, really, really well anymore. And I know this is an international show, but I'm just going to be very much a nationalist here. And one of the things that the United States of America does really well is colleges and universities. I mean, they make the world a better place nationally and internationally. I think we need to tell that story more.
No, all apologies to Christine from Oxford, who's on the call right now. They do it pretty well over there at Oxford.
My apologies.
Yeah. Howard, so how do you think about the best way to assess the ROI of alumni engagement work? We often use the term ROE, return on engagement, as another sort of
I can't wait to hear this answer, Ryan.
Yeah. So it's ROE, sort of slightly different way to think about the results of our work. So ROI, ROE, Howard, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in return on investment. I think the reason I got hired by John Hennessy, who was the 10th president of Stanford, was because I was a business guy. He liked that because he saw I ran my own business. I was an entrepreneur. And so I get it. And I'm a huge believer, as we are here, everyone here on staff at Stanford, I'm a huge believer in measurement and metrics. So let me just put that out front. But alumni relations is not a business in the classic sense of the word, right? So we have to think about ROI in a bit different way than you would if you were a business. If we were a business at Stanford, if the Stanford Alumni Association were a business, we would ignore 30, 40% of our alumni who don't seem to care about their alumni status, right? That's what a company would do. Like, they're not buying our product. Let's forget them. But we think of ourselves as reaching, serving, engaging all, capital A-L-L, neon, bold, underlined, you name it, all. A business would never do that, right? So what I like to think about is, we don't run this as a business. We run it in a business-like manner, right? And so, but we do that because a business wouldn't appeal to all. They would focus. I mean, that's, you know, the antithesis of most strategic plans is such that focus is paramount, right? So having everyone is the antithesis. So from 35,000 people a year, I think I told you that we think of ourselves as the marketing arm, the corporate marketing arm. And so the analogy I use here, if you were to go to Tim Cook at Apple and say, what's the ROI on your corporate brand marketing arm spend? He would say, I can't really tell you. I can tell you what our ROI is on our spend for marketing the iPad versus the iPhone versus versus other products in the Apple arsenal, but he wouldn't be able to tell you the ROI on the corporate brand marketing spend. So we measure everything we do. We measure things behaviorally, we measure things in terms of sentiments, but I think we all have to be very careful about the ROI measures, because the fact of the matter is, it's very difficult to measure what we do. I mean, this is when everyone brings up the Einstein quote, right? Or at least attributed to Einstein, that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. I think that's really true for what we do. And I know that's uncomfortable for most people, because our bosses are saying, show me your worth.
I was just going to ask you that. Just going to ask you about that.
And so what I do, listen, I'll tell you what I do with Mark Tessier-Levine, who's my boss, the president of Stanford. I show him our net promoter score and all the stuff that we do. It's the ultimate question about loyalty, right? I show him, we measure everything we do on an NPS basis. And we compare our NPS scores over time and against programs. And then every 3 years, we do an alumni feelings and engagement survey where we dive deeply into a representative sample of the entire alumni body to test sentiment, right? So as the name would say, how do you feel about your relationship with Stanford? And we follow this maniacally to make sure that we understand how we're doing.
Howard, let me push you a little bit, and maybe an unfair question, but I don't care. You can handle it. What do you say to a person who, so you clearly have support and you've built a base of, your gravitas at Stanford allows you to be able to partly live in the mindset you just described. You have a president, a previous president, and the current one who support this notion. What do you say to the person who works for a VP for advancement, who's worried about hitting this year's annual giving goal or the campaign goal, or even up to a president who may not have that enlightenment, and the alumni person may not have that, built that credibility up to be able to say, don't worry about it, I got it.
Yeah, I know exactly the question you're asking, Chris. So the first answer would be, I would say to that person, that's why I would be a terrible consultant in this industry, in this craft, in this profession, because I would find it difficult to answer that question. I know you guys have great answers for that question. I would just say, if we're going to look at models in this world where philanthropy works, let's look at the schools that are some of the best fundraising organizations in the world. And I think in the top 5, you'd have to put Stanford, right? I've worked with 3 vice presidents for development so far: John Ford, Martin Schell, and now John Denny, right? Because I've been around a while. Each and every one of them will tell you that the Stanford model works beautifully from a philanthropy standpoint, because our job here is focused entirely on engagement, connection, and good feelings, and making our alumni feel connected to the institution, feel good about the institution, and feel open to the university being a part of their lives. That makes their job much less difficult. And I think the results point to a world where that kind of long-term investment is paying tremendous dividends. on the fundraising side. Once again, that's not why we exist, but we know if we do our jobs well, it makes their job less difficult.
Chelsea, go forward real quick, Ryan. Chelsea,
ahead, Chris.
Measuring ROE via NPS, alumni survey every 3 years, and what was you said? I think you said three things that you measure there. So ROE, NPS, alumni survey, and
well, behaviors. I mean, we track behaviors like everyone else, but it's really, we use the NPS on everything we do just to get a sense for how we're doing what we're doing, right? It doesn't tell you what to do. And then what we do is we measure sentiments through that alumni feelings engagement survey. We just completed our 2022 survey this past year, and we're looking at those data. And by the way, that's a great way to see trends. 3 years ago, we saw that we were having some difficulties with our undergraduate young alumni who did not feel as good about Stanford as previous cohorts of undergraduate young alumni 0 to 5 years out. And that was a canary in the coal mine, which made us focus more on that group.
That's great. For those that don't know, NPS, Net Promoter Score, just Google it. You can Google the term, Howard mentioned it, the ultimate question. It's a 20-year-old survey trend that's been in for-profit, nonprofit uses it to measure satisfaction and customer support and whether or not you would recommend another. It's the question, you probably all know it. You may not know what it's called. It's the question that you get when you get off a United flight based on your recent experience on United Airlines. Would you recommend United to a friend or colleague? That's NPS. And there's a whole social science data set behind it on Net Promoter Score if you want to look more.
Howard, we got a couple minutes left in our live broadcast here, and I wanted to ask you about the changing dynamic around the different types of skills and experiences leaders in our field need to have. In your estimation, how have things changed over the last few years? And if you were to hire another leader for your team, right, and someone who maybe someday will lead the program at Stanford after you're gone, what would you look for?
Yeah, what a great question. An alum sent to me a number of years ago, "You've got the easiest job in the world," which I said, that is not true. But he said, "You sell a product, Stanford, to a customer base that already purchased it in the past. Our former students, now known as alums. So, I mean, what could be easier than reselling the same product?" And I said, "Oh, trust me when I tell you it's not that easy." We are at a very interesting inflection point in alumni relations. How do we do what we do in a world with countless substitutes for the programs and services we've traditionally offered, in a world that is saturated with things to do, in a population that seems to have no free time, right? So we've been fundamentally disintermediated, and we have to figure out a way to intermediate it again. And so when I think about leaders, what I think about is, we need leaders who understand how to break through the clutter. We need leaders who understand the difference between a feature and a benefit. We need leaders that can engage across a customer base that ranges from age 20 to 100 plus, right? We need people who can help develop programs and services that add value to the lives of our alumni and make what we do relevant to their current lives and future dreams. The nostalgia strategy does not work. I mean, you play off it a little bit, but the fact of the matter is, if we're going to be relevant in the lives of our alumni, we've got to add value to their lives, right? How do we add value to the lives in a way that is distinctively us, right? Not something that LinkedIn can do or Facebook can do or, the Aspen Ideas Institute can do. How do we do that, right? At Stanford, it's all about content and community, right? Those are the two C's for us. It's tying them to the content of Stanford to help them understand the world, right? If you want to understand Ukraine, you can pick your flavor of news, or you can pick somebody who is seemingly unbiased, research-based, peer-reviewed in the form of a faculty member at Stanford. Let's help our alumni bring relevance to their lives. And we need leaders, as I said at the onset, who can show the value of what we do and the value of our alumni bodies to our campuses. If not, we're sunk. So that's all. That's all we need.
I love it. I just said a similar paragraph to the alumni board at NC State. I use content and network, where you say community, and I talk about value add. It's got to be history, tradition, nostalgia don't work. It's got to be something that's going to have meaning for them.
I agree, Chris.
So there's a lot in there to unpack around content and skills to create good content and how to distribute it and how to track its success. But it's amazing how quickly 30 minutes flies by when we've got such a great guest on the show. So we're going to pause just for a moment. Chris, if you could share with our live listeners who we have on the show in 2 weeks' time, then we're going to record a second 30-minute bonus section with Howard, which, of course, everyone listening will want to check out.
Yeah, 2 weeks from today, we'll be talking to maybe but one of the tallest alumni leaders in the profession, Todd McCubbin from Mizzou, University of Missouri.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Fantastic guy, but when you talk to Todd in person, you go like this the entire time you're talking to him.
I've not met Todd in person. I'm looking forward to that. It's always an equalizer over Zoom, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. What a great group of folks on the discussion in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing Alumless with your network. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with Todd McCubbin, and of course, pick up the podcast version of Alumless so you can hear our second half with Howard Wolf. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, guys.